The opening of the city's port to the wider world has brought a ton of opportunity and efficiency to the private sector, which is triggering a wave of massive growth for the city. So today, we're implementing a development plan that will nearly triple the footprint of the city and bring in thousands of new residents to fill these vacant jobs. We'll be updating nearly every city service and implementing a bunch of new transit routes. And at the end, we're going to build something quite special for our first lakefront development. Welcome back to Salmon Bay. So you might remember a couple episodes ago we started implementing our version of the real-life Denny Hill regrade, and today is the day we finish it because our new development is going to stretch all the way to the base of the hill to the north. But first, I need to buy up all the land we're going to use today, and it is a big purchase. Alright, let's just get into it. I'm regrading this whole area to make development easier and more dense, and at the same time I'm going to start drawing in the major roads for reference and to make sure the elevations are all correct in the correct places. My goal is to flatten out the hill and push some of that dirt around to even up the slopes everywhere else. I'll continue this primary downtown arterial. This is the one that becomes the Salmon Bay Highway on the other side of the city, straight through with a fairly level slope. This means that we'll have a gentle slope from this street all the way down to the lake in the back of the city, with the difficult elevation changes just on the bay side of the street. I'm also going to draw through the bicycle transit street from last time, and then I'll upgrade the road that goes through the city in front of the high school to a 4-lane road as it goes through this neighborhood. I've added another 4-lane street crosswise along the edge of the large hill, which is the northern boundary of today's build. The next major road is Highway 99 on the waterfront and its parallel train line. I'm going to extend the highway through this new space and the 4-track rail as well. I want this to connect to the hill border roads separate from the rail, and I also want 99 to cross over the tracks here, so I'm going to overpass the highway over the tracks and connect the border street into it. I'm doing this for the sake of future developments along the bay north of here, and I'm not sure when we'll get to it, but if this looks a bit excessive, that's why. Now all that's left is finishing up the grid and fixing everything to get ready for development. Okay, so here's the completed street layout, and you can see the sense of scale now for how big of a development this really is compared to the existing city. As we pan through the neighborhood, you can see the topography that we've achieved here. It's a pretty gentle slope down the hill on the lakeside, and all of this will be pretty easy to build on. It took me a while to get the merging of these grids figured out. I hope that these areas look intelligent and that the awkward angles make sense. I've also removed all of the trees from this area to make it easier to see the details, but don't worry, we'll add plenty of landscaping back in as we develop the plots. I went ahead and added a small train station at the waterfront. A significant amount of the city's jobs are in the waterfront, so building for the central train station that's already in the waterfront will be key as the city expands. I will be adding a lot of transit today, but I wanted to make sure to get this laid out in order to get the rail tracks final. You can see that there's essentially two-way rail lines running the waterfront here, and effectively the bay side is the local service passenger rail, and the other line is for through or cargo traffic. This is a road builder 4-line track, which I'm using so that the street crossings happen in a single node, but I did also have to use the traffic mod to keep these intersections from having crazy interlacing. I'm excited to get started building actual things, but it's getting hard for me to talk about the build because nothing here has names. So let's go through and put names to a few things. Starting with the important streets, this main street coming up from the highway I keep mentioning, I'll simply name Salmon Bay Avenue. This bicycle/transit street 1 block up, I'll name the very creative 2nd Avenue. Up towards the lake, after convincing the game that these are separate streets, I'll name the one that will run along the west side of the lake Westlake Avenue, and then the orthogonal street will be South Lake Street. For districts, I'll push the waterfront district all the way up, and then I want to stretch the existing Chinook and Coho districts out because they're currently too small and I think making them larger will make more sense. Along South Lake Street, I'll make a new district which I'll call Pinky, following the salmon theme, also known as Uptown. Lastly, let's name the relevant bits of geography. This lake in real life is called Lake Union, and I'm quite keen to instead call this Lake Onion. This hill we're building under is called Queen Anne, but in Salmon Bay, I'm going to name this Colshan Hill, which is the anglicized form of the Nooksack name for Mount Baker. And it would be named that because it would be one of the only places in the city that you could see the peak of that mountain on a clear day. Now let's start building out this neighborhood, beginning with city services. I'm going to start with water sewer because we're already exporting sewage before expansion, so we definitely need this. We have this city service park down here. This is along Highway 99 between Salmon Bay and Fishing Spear, and it's the perfect location for a water treatment plant. This area that's filled into the tide flats was the original site of the city's garbage dump, which provided the material used to fill, so it's already city property and already also quite polluted. For a bit of detailing, I'm fencing in an area large enough to contain the building's upgrades, and I'm placing a non-functional prop version of one of those upgrades just for looks. The city doesn't need that upgrade yet, but I want it to look more like water treatment and not just a big office building here. Some basic landscaping and a few surfaces here and there will complete the look. The previous sewer outlet is attached to the power plant. This is supposed to represent the output of the power plant's coolant water, which definitely would not be this polluted, so I'll take this opportunity to remove the real sewer outlet here and replace it with a prop outlet to keep the aesthetic purpose, and eventually this brown water will clear up. Another service the city already needs is expanded fire coverage. There have been a few burn downs nearby, but there's another issue too. All of the city's specialized industries have collapsed. This is probably because of some economy balance updates causing these to reset, but unfortunately I would have to delete and redraw all of these, which I don't want to do. The game holds proper disaster relief stuff pretty late and expensive in the tech tree, so I'm going to work around that limitation using the modular service blocks mod and just add that capability into this regular fire station. Alright, the next services are a bit easier. For schools, I want to add 2 new elementary schools and a second high school. I think we'll need the capacity, and to go with them, I'll add in a few extra sports facilities and do a touch of detailing. I'm mostly picking buildings that have stone or brick exteriors because I want this neighborhood to still have that historic looking architecture that we've been doing in other parts of the city. This high school is challenging because it's basically on a cliff, but since we have a whole hill's worth of material to play with, I'm not afraid of making big topographical changes. It needs to look steady enough to support the building, have enough outdoor space for students, with some perimeter hedges to prevent students from falling down the hill. And we can always hide imperfections behind natural landscaping, which we want to be here anyway. Next, I'll plop in a vanilla medical clinic and do some simple touch-ups to make it look like it belongs in this slightly irregular lot. Okay, the last service we're going to do at this stage is welfare. And I'll just plop in the Eastern European Welfare Office over here in an area that's central to the city with wide coverage. Maybe it's time to go back to Salmon Bay. Where was I anyway? Oh boy, there's a lot to do. Okay, let's get started on this transit project. So my plan here is to bring in a subway line which will run overground through the heart of the city. The advantage of using subway here is that they can then burrow into the hills, and I can connect the hilltop neighborhoods to the city center using underground stations. As the city grows, we'll be able to connect neighborhoods with a single mode of transit without having to either climb up or down hills or skip neighborhoods. So in the city today, we'll connect Wee Scotland with an underground station through the city proper with overground rail. To start with, I'm using this small train depot, and I'll start a tunnel into Colshan Hill here that we'll eventually use when we start climbing up the hill with the city. For now, this is just a placeholder so I can line the tracks up properly. Now let's build out the line. I'm placing the stations relatively far apart and evenly spread, and trying to get the stations in places that would be valuable in terms of connections or nearby density. Most importantly, the downtown stop is right next to the tram line that goes to the waterfront. We want to make as much of the city as possible connected to transit, so being able to transfer modes is very important. One important thing here, I made sure to turn anarchy off when placing the tracks. That way I know that I don't have any support pillars in the wrong place or height issues or anything like that. I want everything to be properly functional. If you've ever played City Skylines 2, you'll know that tunnels are a little tricky. I actually am using anarchy here because the tunnel entrances collide a little with the church, but I want them to be as tight as possible to get all this to look right, and I can make it look real after placing it down with mods like Move It. Now it's just a matter of tidying up the slopes a bit and placing the last track without accidentally breaking the tunnel segments. And then I can create the transit line and we should start seeing subway service.
Activate.
There's one last thing to do before we can start zoning in buildings, which is to expand the bicycle network and plop in a bunch of bike parking near the new transit stations. I've tried to lay out the bike paths in a way that would make it easy for bikes to traverse the city without having to get onto busy arterials. And I've also tried to concentrate a lot of the bike parking around the destinations that we've built so far. Now that we have services and transit in place, the only thing left to do on this project is develop these blocks. My goal here is to concentrate medium densities around the subway stations, including low rent housing like what you're seeing here. I will manually plop every medium density building just to have control over how they're placed and what's around them. I'll squeeze parking in where I can, but since this is transit oriented, I'm not going to provide enough parking for everyone outside of on-street parking. Commercial, with a light dusting of offices, I'll zone in around the transit stops and along arterial streets. Everything else will either be small parks or single family housing. Alright, a few hours later and everything is filled in. Taking a look at the points of interest in the build, I'll highlight a few places that I like. So I added this signature building, the first mansion in the city. Pretty sweet. The largest single development is this apartment complex. This uses apartment buildings from the Netherlands region pack, and it even has parking. I also put in this grocery store here. This one is drivable, plenty of parking, with a nice city park behind it, and then behind that is one of the elementary schools. Around this subway station would be the most valuable part of today's build. It features a low-rent apartment complex. These are great around transit stops because the location is great for the quality of life. They're high density, but obviously there's some comfort drawbacks to having a train right outside your window. Across the street is a signature shopping center. I really like this asset here because it sets the tone for this area as an upscale shopping area. I also like that these billboards are just super visible for the commuters, and these rooftop dining areas would have really amazing views of the bay. Behind that we have this cool urban park, which I like a lot, and then there's some upscale apartment buildings. This is just a really nice area, I think. The next station to the north I also like a lot. There are a lot of apartments and a strip mall, as well as access to more bicycle amenities and natural green space. In the back there is our elementary school and high school, so it's a good location for families too. And you could walk down the hill to the new heavy rail station and take the train to work. As for the hill, I kept this very low density since the terrain is so difficult and filled it in with a lot of natural landscaping. This part of the world is very green, and I want to make sure there's always trees poking through in the urban areas. I concentrated on natural-looking clumps of forest and gaps between developments, along with more manicured greenery where appropriate, like in parks. On the most hilly areas, the vegetation is thick and unkempt, especially around the train tracks. But I did want to keep in mind people's views. I didn't want to block too many windows and their nice bay views, so a lot of it is shorter trees or bushes close to the water. Looking at the city from the water, we can see how visible the homes are, so mission accomplished. This has been maybe too ambitious of an episode, but don't worry, I'm not done yet. The last thing I want to do is build a public waterfront area and city hall complex on the south end of Lake Onion. I want to open up some water to public access, and I want to build in a big city administration campus that will also serve as nice public space for the community. I'm using the vanilla city hall as the main building, and I'll do a bunch of custom work around it to make it fill out this huge block. Next to it, I'm using the French police station and city hall from the France asset pack as supplemental admin buildings. Together, these create a European government theme for the neighborhood. This has a new grid layout so city hall can face the lake straight on, and I'll loosely connect the two grids together. This is a pretty small neighborhood, so it won't break our grid too much. For the waterfront, I am building an area that's close to the water level and elevation, and I'm using these pedestrian streets to create a wall separating the grades. To access the low side, I'm building in these ramps flush with the wall, which I can do because of the power of Move It. This entire park area will be pedestrian only, and I'll add in some choice assets on the low side to make it really shine. Now the layout is done, and I'll move on to filling in the blocks behind City Hall. To fit the theme, I'm going to build in 2 blocks using the French medium density assets with a mix of regular residential and mixed use. I'm only going to do these 2 blocks this way for now. I think it'll look more convincing if this whole neighborhood is this way, but that doesn't quite fit the scale of the city right now. To get the city hall to fit this big block, I ended up basically remaking the entire outside of the asset with custom surfaces, lights, trees, and working paths. I generally followed the style set by the original asset, but made it my own, and in the end, it should look like the city hall was meant to be placed in a lot this big. This also took a long time to do. My inspiration for this part of the build is the city center of Victoria, British Columbia. The provincial legislature building and the area around it is beautiful, and it's all right on a busy waterfront. It's a really wonderful city. I like that the government building has a lot of open grass space, and I like that you can walk down to the water to get ice cream. Anyway, I like going down to the water to get a meal or an ice cream. This is what I'm trying to emulate here. This part of the city in general has a lot of this sort of Renaissance revival or whatever architecture, which is why I've added so much European flair to this part of Salmon Bay. The city of Salmon Bay is also canonically part of Cascadia, not the United States, which means Victoria and Salmon Bay share a federal government. And that means that it makes perfect sense for our government center to look a lot like Victoria's. Well, would you look at that? I was so busy talking, it looks like the build's done. There's just a little bit of cleanup I want to do before we end the episode. First, looking at our transit routes, we have lots of north to south routes, but we're missing some crosswise connections. I'll fill this gap with buses, so first I need to go back to the city service zone from earlier and add in a bus depot. And then I'll just create a line that connects the new city admin area down South Lake Street to the new train station on the bay. And lastly, the road network on the east side of the city is kind of a mess, and I want to plan for the future a bit. We need more connectivity and more access to the Rainier Highway. The highway is too far for us to build out to, and there's also some pretty challenging terrain here. My idea is to run a new highway along these power lines that will serve as our local access highway, which will connect into the Rainier Highway up north. I didn't do this on purpose, but I also realized that picking this route is actually fairly close to where Interstate 5 is in real life, so I'm pretty pleased about that. And here we are at the end of the episode. Our transit overview is showing fairly decent usage on the new subway and bus lines, which is good, but the subway investment here is definitely more of a long-term vision, so this will be more and more important as time goes on. Thank you for watching. I squeezed a lot of build into this little video, and the next few builds should be more narrow in scope. I hope to see you again here in Salmon Bay. Good night.